In a grim vision of another world, a 30-year-old man in a business suit is held aloft, upside down and seemingly lifeless, in the powerful grip of a monstrous, pig-headed beast with glowing red eyes. The moment is starkly punctuated by a single, ominous word, death. As he hangs there, his mind races with a single, desperate thought. He does not want to die. In his final moments, he questions how he ended up in this predicament. A single playing card, the Demon's Dragoon, slips from his jacket pocket, tumbling through the air. The scene abruptly shifts to a brightly lit card game shop. A 30-year-old man, Susaku Kamafuda, slams his hand down on the table, a triumphant grin on his face. He declares his victory, announcing that he's paying the magic cost to unleash his trump card, Demon's Dragoon, for a one-shot attack. He throws his head back and laughs, reveling in the feeling of turning the tables on his opponent. Across from him, his friend clutches his head in frustration, unable to believe Susaku actually drew the very card he needed to win. His face is flushed with pure ecstasy as he proclaims that the rush of a card game is the best, a legal high. He boasts that this marks his 10th game and 8th victory. One of his friends remarks that his skills haven't gotten rusty, while another apologizes, admitting they had to bring out their old cards just for this reunion. After their games conclude, his friends thank him for the invitation. One man with glasses mentions that it's difficult for him to get back home, while another adds that his wife would be angry about the travel expenses. The third friend simply expresses his gratitude, saying it was a good time. As Susaku walks home alone, he reflects on how his friends have all moved on with their lives, moving to the city, getting married, and effectively graduating from card games. Back in his room, surrounded by his extensive collection, he laments that he is still just a hobbyist, unlike them. He announces his arrival at his family home. From inside, a woman's voice, his mother's, calls out his name, telling him that dinner is ready and he should wash his hands quickly. He responds with a meek yes. Seated at the dinner table with his parents, he endures a lecture from his mother. She admonishes him for being 30 years old and still just playing games, urging him to get married soon. She even mentions having a matchmaking deck ready for him, as his father eats quietly beside them. He faces the embodiment of societal pressure across the card table, an opponent who sneers at his life choices. The man aggressively dismisses his passion, shouting about marriage hunting and vowing to crush all of Susaku's arguments with a top-tier deck. In reality, this sentiment echoes in a conversation with his mother. He questions her, arguing that marriage is an impossible game for a card-gaming man-child like himself. She simply sighs, exasperated by his attitude. She responds by placing an envelope on the table, revealing a thick stack of cash. It's 220,000 yen, she explains, for him to use at a marriage consultation service. Stunned by the amount, his mind immediately jumps to how many new card packs he could buy. He protests, insisting he can't accept the money from her. Unperturbed, his mother sips her drink and calmly informs him that it's fine, because the money was already his. This statement only deepens his confusion. Her next words strike him with cold dread. She explains that she got the money by selling every single card from his room. His eyes widen in horror at the revelation. He bolts to his room, only to find his worst fears realized. The shelves, once filled with his prized collection, are now completely bare. Every card is gone. The sight triggers a flood of memories of his youth, of painstakingly building his collection since elementary school. He clutches the 220,000 yen, a sum that feels insultingly small for a lifetime of passion. All that remains is the single deck he keeps in his case. From that last deck, he carefully draws his most treasured card, the Demon's Dragoon. He gazes at it, calling the creature his partner. The full weight of his loss crashes down on him, and he collapses to his knees. He cries out that they weren't just cards, they were his youth. He questions how his mother could sell a family member's private possessions without even checking their value online. Utterly defeated, he remains hunched on the floor. He wonders if this is the end, if it's finally time to retire from the game. With a final, resigned gesture, he slides his Demon's Dragoon card across the floor. He sorted through the few cards he had left, his eyes landing on one he didn't recognize, Otherworld Summoning. He wondered to himself if he'd always possessed such a card. As he held it up, the card suddenly erupted in a brilliant flash of light. He cried out in shock, demanding to know what was happening as his eyes widened in disbelief. The light intensified, and an unseen force began to drag him across the floor. He let out a desperate, guttural scream, completely powerless. He was pulled inexorably toward a vertical pillar of light that had materialized in his room. His deck box, the last remnant of his collection, was left behind on the wooden floor. The disorienting transit ended abruptly. He found himself standing in an unfamiliar, open space, questioning where he was. The air was thick with the scent of beasts and damper. Before he could fully process his new surroundings, a colossal shadow fell over him. He looked up to see a monstrous, pig-headed giant looming above, its massive form crackling with a strange energy. The creature stared down, its breath hot and foul, letting out a questioning grunt. He stared back, his mind reeling as he wondered if this could possibly be a dream. His question was answered by a deafening roar that confirmed his worst fear. This was real. He stumbled backward in terror as the beast's massive hand lunged to grab him. The creature's grip was like iron. It effortlessly snatched him and held him upside down by one leg. He dangled helplessly, thinking what a terrible fate it was to have his cards sold only to be eaten by a monster. As the beast opened its cavernous mouth, A single card slipped from his pocket. He didn't want to die. As he fell toward the monster's maw, his desperation peaked. He screamed his refusal to die. At that moment, the fallen card erupted in a brilliant flash, hovering before a massive stone pillar that shot up from the ground. He knelt in shock as the card on the ground flared with power. A torrent of light erupted, engulfing the monstrous pig-like creature before it could strike. He could only stare, whispering, "This is..." From that blinding light emerged a colossal, draconic beast. Looking up at the magnificent creature, he understood. This was the partner he had met in this other world. Time passed. The memory of that first encounter gave way to a new reality, one dominated by a colossal tree whose canopy pierced the clouds. The great tree stood as a silent giant, its massive trunk rising from a seemingly endless sea of dense, untamed forest. Within that wilderness, the sharp crack of an axe splitting wood echoed near a small cluster of dilapidated, abandoned houses reclaimed by nature. The one responsible for the noise was Susaku, now shirtless and with a more hardened physique. Wiping sweat from his brow, he sighed that the day's work was finally over. All that remained, he noted, were patrols and repairs. His tireless efforts had transformed the ruins into a defensible outpost. It had been 32 days since he arrived in this other world, and against all odds, he was surviving. He considered himself lucky to have found this abandoned village. Standing among the stumps of trees he had felled himself, he steeled his resolve. It was time to get to work. His work now involved a unique power. Holding a card depicting a burly orc, he requested its aid for the day and commanded, "Summon." The creature materialized before him, a hulking warrior ready for battle. He knew this was all thanks to the power of his cards. The summoned beast awaited his command. Susaku explained his ability to materialize monsters from cards, turning them into familiars that obey his every order. He then pointed toward the forest, instructing the orc to attack any monsters it found. The creature grunted in assent. His orc familiar, acting on command, plunged into the forest where it was immediately ambushed by a pack of snarling werewolves leaping from the trees. It met their feral aggression with a roar of its own, swinging its massive cleaver in a devastating arc that tore through the air. The battle was decided in an instant. As the defeated werewolves collapsed, their physical forms dissolved into light, materializing as new cards. The orc seemed to understand that this was a manifestation of its master's power. Back at his base, Susaku examined the spoils, 3 werewolf cards. He took note of his findings, observing that the distribution of monsters in this region seemed to have a certain bias. He stood beside his orc familiar, his resolve hardening. He vowed that he would absolutely survive and return to his original world. Turning to his companion, he asked when it would be ready to set out again. His gaze sharpened with a fierce intensity. He would not only survive, he would also buy back the cards that had been sold. While venturing through the forest, the orc suddenly halted, its ears twitching. Susaku asked what was wrong, wondering what could be lurking deeper within the woods. Elsewhere in that same forest, 2 young women ran frantically through the dense trees, breathing heavily as they fled from an unseen threat. Their escape came to a sudden stop. The warrior, Choco, shouted a warning to her companion on the left. A massive, wounded giant ogre crashed through the foliage before them. The mage gasped, shocked to encounter such a creature in this state. The hulking beast, though covered in wounds, loomed over them menacingly. The mage worriedly asked what they should do, but Choco was firm. She declared they would survive and not die here. Her companion agreed, and they resolved to tackle the ogre together. She and her companion could only watch as the giant ogre's attack was suddenly intercepted by a powerful orc. Behind the summoned beast stood Susaku, who, upon hearing the women speak, confirmed that his language could be understood in this world. The orc familiar immediately engaged the massive ogre, their brutal blows shaking the forest floor as they clashed in a test of pure strength. However, the ogre's overwhelming power proved too much, and a single, devastating strike sent the orc flying backward through the air. As his familiar was thrown aside, Susaku explained to the women that his partner, the orc, was fighting with all its might. He then turned to face the towering giant ogre, realizing internally that the creature was far stronger than any of the monster cards he currently possessed. Despite the danger, he calmly instructed Choco and her friend to flee to a nearby abandoned village, assuring them he would handle the situation. He faced the roaring giant ogre with unwavering confidence, declaring that it was no problem because his true partner was the strongest of all. As the beast charged, he held up a single card, the Demon's Dragon, and announced it as his ultimate trump card. As the giant ogre looms menacingly, its shadow falling over the 2 women, Susaku Kamafuda, pushed into a corner, prepares to unleash his ultimate trump card. The creature brings its massive club crashing down, but just before impact, Susaku appears, standing defiantly between the monster and the women. With a single word, he initiates his counterattack, Summon. In response to his call, a colossal, armored dragon materializes from a torrent of energy, letting out a ferocious roar. He announces its name with authority. "Come forth, my partner, Demon's Dragoon." The dragon's massive claw intercepts the ogre's club, stopping the devastating blow with ease. As the woman in the cloak watches in awe, Susaku explains the creature's ability, stating that according to the card's rules, Demon's Dragoon possesses destruction resistance when it is summoned. He continues, revealing that by paying a magic cost, he can command it to deal damage to a target monster. With a determined expression, he issues his command, "Burn it to ashes, Demon's Dragoon." The dragon opens its maw, gathering a sphere of destructive energy. It unleashes the attack, a blinding beam of pure power, roaring out the technique's name, Unlimited Judgment. The blast completely engulfs the giant ogre, which disintegrates under the overwhelming force. As its body vanishes, a single, glowing card materializes in its place and flutters to the ground. The woman with the staff picks it up, examining the image of the ogre now imprinted on it. She wonders aloud if it is some kind of talisman, then asks Susaku if he just summoned a monster with it. The other woman looks on, equally perplexed. He smirks, breathing heavily from the exertion. He admits that summoning Demon's Dragoon is incredibly tiring, explaining that end cards have a high cost, making a last resort. His cryptic explanation only infuriates the woman with the staff, who demands he stop speaking nonsense. Suddenly, he collapses, declaring he's too tired to move and asking the others to handle the rest. His request is met with anger, as the long-haired woman questions if he expects the girls to carry him. His gaze, however, drifts to a dilapidated building nearby. He observes that it, too, was likely attacked by monsters, noting the speed of the Magent's invasion. He realizes with certainty that they have found a dungeon. He awoke to a soft sensation, his head resting in the lap of a woman he didn't recognize. She looked down at him and asked if he was awake, introducing herself as Otome, a magic user. His first conscious thought was of the pillowy softness against his head, a veritable wall of flesh. His confusion was interrupted by the sharp voice of the other woman, Choco. With arms crossed, she declared that Susaku was indebted to her and that she wouldn't let Otome claim him. She insisted he was her benefactor, a claim that only deepened his bewilderment as his thoughts drifted back to the dungeon. Otome turned her gaze toward Choco, her voice firm. She admonished her, calling her an outsider and warning her not to speak out of turn. Choco recoiled, stunned into silence by the sharp rebuke. Flustered, Choco insisted Otome keep quiet, but the magic user calmly explained their purpose. She revealed that they had come in search of an unexplored dungeon, emphasizing that this information must remain a secret between them. Her attention then returned to the man in her lap. With a knowing smile, she stated that they would require his cooperation, addressing him by the title of Legendary Summoner. He processed her words, his mind racing. The title was unexpected, and he couldn't fathom why a summoner with such apparent talent would need his help. His thoughts were momentarily distracted as he once again became aware of the soft pressure against the back of his head. He mused internally that the current situation felt like some sort of trap from a game, though far more pleasant than the usual spiked ceilings. A strange sense of calm washed over him, and he wondered at his own lack of panic. Now on his feet, he watched as Choco accused Otome of attempting some strange form of seduction. Otome dismissed the accusation, explaining she had merely been asking for his help and credited his game brain for getting them out of a dangerous spot. She then directed his attention forward, asking if he could see the labyrinth tree. Following her gesture, his eyes widened at the sight before them. A colossal tree that soared into the heavens, its immense trunk piercing the clouds. This was the labyrinth tree. At its base, nestled amongst the massive roots, was a dark, gaping maw, an entrance leading deep underground. Dungeons are the heart of this otherworld, places where countless adventurers gather in pursuit of immense fortunes. Following this very pursuit, Otome explains that they too are searching for a dungeon, but one that remains undiscovered. The word otherworld echoes in Susaku's mind as he listens. His thoughts drift back to the moment he was flung into this new reality. He recalls a black card materializing in his hand, its surface bearing the inscription, Otherworld Summoning. She continues, theorizing that the name of the Otherworld dungeon might be a clue. Otome clarifies that established dungeons have powerful entry restrictions, barring newcomers, which necessitates their search for an undiscovered one. She then raises a finger to her lips, cautioning him to keep this a secret. Her expression grows earnest as she admits their search has been fruitless so far. She then reminds him of the time they were attacked by a monster in the forest, explaining that it was he, the summoner, who saved them. He appears confused by the title. Choco, her arms crossed and her expression firm, elaborates that a summoner is someone with a rare talent to call forth monsters. As she speaks, an image forms of a powerful mage commanding a colossal demonic dragon. Otome's voice explains that among the many talents, monster summoning is exceptionally rare, making a true summoner a figure of legend. The full weight of her words crashes down on him. Otome declares that this legendary summoner truly exists and that it is him. His face twists into a mask of pure shock and disbelief. She steps closer, her hands clasped in a plea. She implores him for his help, certain that with the power of a summoner on their side, their search for a dungeon is guaranteed to succeed. He recoils, completely overwhelmed by the proposition. He vehemently denies their claims, insisting he's just an ordinary man, not some legendary summoner or even a card gamer. He shouts that it's all impossible, absolutely impossible. He continued to refuse, shouting that their unreasonable request held no merit for a summoner. Seeing his reaction, Otome apologized with a downcast expression, conceding that they were being a nuisance. Her dejected words struck a chord within him. He found himself alone with his thoughts, questioning the morality of his own actions. Someone was in trouble, asking for help. Was it truly right to refuse? Was this the proper way for a man his age to behave? After a moment of internal struggle, he made his decision. All right, he declared, I'll help you. Otome's face lit up with surprise and hope, while Choco, still skeptical, demanded to know if he was being truthful. Sweating slightly but putting on a brave face, he held up one of his cards. With a surge of feigned confidence, he announced, My name is Susaku Kamifuda, and I am the legendary summoner. And so, swept up by the moment, his new legend began. Transported to another world, Susaku Kamifuda gained a unique ability, the power to transform monsters into cards he could command. Before him looms a colossal dragon, a testament to the very power he now wields. In this new world, he is approached by two women. One, a magic user, beams at him, identifying him as the legendary summoner. She eagerly asks if he would lend them his strength. He considers their plea, acknowledging that his power is indeed that of a summoner in this world. He finds himself unable to refuse their earnest request and agrees to cooperate. With his decision made, he holds up a card and declares his identity with conviction. My name is Susaku Kamifuda. I am a legendary summoner. Unbeknownst to him, this bold declaration would soon invite great trouble. As they walk through a rustic village, the magic user remarks that the summoner is using the settlement as his base. Her companion, a swordswoman, retorts that he seems to be using the village however he pleases. The magic user turns back to him, her expression full of admiration. She exclaims that it's amazing he's living all alone in a place surrounded by such a dangerous forest. She continues, reflecting that while he is called a summoner here, his true ability to turn monsters into cards is a terrifyingly powerful asset. Susaku listens, a hint of unease on his face as he holds a card. His unease deepens as the swordswoman poses a sharp question. Is the power of summoners so dangerous that he must hide his presence from the kingdom? Elsewhere, under a downpour, a sinister group gathers. Their leader, an old man, explains to his monstrous subordinates that a summoner can single-handedly match the Night Order or the King's army, a power great enough to overthrow the entire country. The magic user confirms this grim reality to a stunned Susaku. She explains that because of this immense talent, if the kingdom were to find him, he would be designated a target for subjugation. The word echoes in his mind, a target. He considered the grave implications of what he'd just learned. At first, he thought it must be a misunderstanding, but he couldn't deny the possibility. This was a secret he would have to keep close. The cheerful request from a magic user broke his train of thought. She clasped her hands together, eagerly asking if he would lend them his strength. He recognized the pattern immediately, a classic plea targeting someone's weakness. She pressed him, asking if he would refuse. As he hesitated, trying to formulate a response, the swordswoman sharply interjected, telling her companion to wait. Before he could answer, the swordswoman grabbed the magic user's arm, declaring angrily that she refused to acknowledge this man. She was completely against the idea of involving him. He watched them, perplexed. What kind of monstrous power did they think he possessed that a single person could make such a difference? The swordswoman turned on her companion, demanding to know why she was asking this man for help. She argued that they needed a reliable collaborator, not someone who was a liability. Her companion countered calmly, asking if the swordswoman had told anyone else about their plan for the dungeon. She pointed out that a man with no connections was the perfect, untraceable asset for their needs. The swordswoman was left speechless. Having made her point, the magic user turned back to Susaku with an apology. She explained that her companion simply wanted to see his power for herself. She continued with a bright smile, proposing a mock battle. It would be the perfect way for him to demonstrate his true abilities against her companion. The sudden proposal left both Susaku and the swordswoman utterly stunned and confused. He stands in a rustic training arena, aghast at the situation. He shouts in protest, asking why he has to fight. Across from him, the swordswoman Choco stands ready, her expression stern. The magic user, Otome, calmly explains that it's just a light spar to test the summoner's abilities, but Susaku finds the idea of a card gamer fighting a human opponent utterly absurd. In response to his hesitation, she brandishes her enormous greatsword, its sheer size intimidating. She impatiently demands that he summon a monster at once, whether it be a dragon or anything else, declaring that she will cut it in two regardless. His gaze shifts from her imposing blade to the single card held between his fingers. He realizes that, from an outside perspective, this matchup seems hopelessly one-sided and foolish. He plays his card, and a muscular werewolf materializes in the center of the arena. Susaku shouts for them to observe its power first, while Choco narrows her eyes in concentration, and Otome watches with a flicker of surprise. The beast crouches low, its tail whipping behind it as it faces the swordswoman. Unintimidated, Choco shouts for it to cause a disturbance. In a burst of speed, the werewolf lunges, moving so quickly that it creates multiple afterimages, swarming Choco from all directions at once. From the sidelines, Otome analyzes the strategy. She notes that Choco's greatsword is powerful but slow, so the plan is to use the agile werewolf to harass and overwhelm her. But Choco remains completely unfazed by the creature's speed. Her expression hardens as she tightens her grip on her sword, bracing for the assault. She sidesteps the werewolf's claws with ease, taunting it not to underestimate her. As Susaku watches in disbelief, She dashes past the beast, her voice ringing out with a single command: accelerate. Her speed becomes a blur of motion, leaving a trail of light as she strikes the werewolf again. Susaku is stunned, questioning how she closed the distance in an instant. He realizes with a shock that the word accelerate was an activation, a sign that she, too, possesses a special ability. As the werewolf is struck down in a flash of movement, the magic user, Otome, begins to explain the nature of their powers. She clarifies that unlike the summoner's monster summoning or her own magic, humans possess inherent, unique abilities known as talents. She reveals that Choco's talent is accelerate, an ability that allows the swordswoman to manipulate her own speed. This power, perfectly compatible with her greatsword, presents a formidable challenge for the summoner. Susaku Kamifuda considers his next move, fanning a set of cards in his hand. He questions what to do, realizing that to counter a swordsman, he would need a card that could increase his summon speed. Before he can act, the swordsman Choco lunges forward with blinding speed, her blade poised to strike. She declares that his timing is off, catching him completely by surprise as his cards scatter. The scene shifts to a different confrontation where the summoned orc faces off against an opponent. Susaku observes that the orc is keeping its distance, realizing he never gave it a command to accelerate or attack. The orc is countering its foe's attacks with its axe. He continues his analysis, wondering if his voiceless ability is usable in this situation. He explains to the orc that there are two ways to command a monster: a direct vocal command and a mental command. He elaborates that while both types of commands can be given, a vocal command like go is better for conveying clear intent. A mental command, by contrast, won't work unless it's more specific, as the creature might not grasp the abstract goal. For concrete actions, a mental command is necessary. The realization strikes him. He recalls Choco's movements and how she was able to activate her skills without speaking. He begins to suspect that there is a difference in effect between vocalizing a command and not, and that her reaction was a clue. Meanwhile, Choco stands ready, having noticed her opponent keeping its distance after her feint. She notes the lack of a counterattack from the orc and wonders if her opponent, like her, can issue commands without speaking. She reflects on her own ability, acceleration. The power of the skill changes depending on whether she vocalizes it. When spoken aloud, the effect is far more potent. For this critical strike, she knows she must use the more powerful, vocalized version. Back with Susaku, he issues a clear vocal command to his orc. From the right, attack. Choco observes this, deducing that if he's shouting a command, he must be going for a decisive blow. She believes she can win if she can just get past the orc's now committed, undefended body. Her expression hardens with resolve. Gripping her sword, she declares that her pride will not allow such a cheap victory. She prepares to meet the challenge head-on. She stands confidently, a smirk playing on her lips as she challenges the summoner to a direct confrontation. A head-on battle, just my style. What will you do, summoner? She asks. Susaku watches her, realizing her true aim is not him, but a single decisive strike to fell his orc. He considers his options. A simple, brute force attack from the orc would surely be dodged. To win this fight, he understands he must first find a way to stop her movement. His mind races for a solution. Summoning another creature is out of the question. He's already brought forth a large monster, and his hand is limited. Desperate for a strategy, his thoughts drift back in time, seeking a hint from a past experience to break the deadlock. In the memory, a card shop owner offers advice to the young players gathered around him. Listen up, he begins. In card games, there's a crucial technique, making it seem like you have something that you actually don't. His younger self looks up from his cards, confused. Something you don't have? I don't get it, sir, he admits, gesturing to the game board. What does that mean in a situation like this one? The shopkeeper recounts a previous duel. A jumbo golem with 5,000 power faced a hyena with only 3,000. Logically, the golem should have won, but the young Susaku had played a giant growth card, doubling his hyena's power to 6,000 and snatching an unexpected victory. He then poses a hypothetical based on that win. So, next time, if your opponent thinks you have giant growth in your hand, they'll hesitate to attack, fearing a counter. But in reality, he reveals, you didn't have that card. You were simply bluffing. The realization strikes the young boy. He finally understands. By making an opponent believe in a threat that doesn't exist, you can restrict their actions. This is a bluff, the shopkeeper concludes. Remember it. It'll come in handy someday. The memory fades, returning him to the present battlefield. A new resolve hardens his expression as he silently thanks his old mentor. That lesson, he realizes, is just as useful now. With his strategy set, he points decisively forward. Thanks to that, I see a path to victory, he declares before bellowing a command. Orc, charge! The beast roars and lunges, stunning Choco with the sheer recklessness of a direct, head-on assault. His orc thundered forward, but Choco stood her ground, unimpressed. She scoffed at the notion that a mere orc's power could overwhelm her, confidently declaring that with her own acceleration, she could counter an attack from any direction. With a defiant glare, she challenged the creature to approach. In response to her challenge, Susaku suddenly roared a new command. Now, jump to the left. The unexpected order caught Choco completely by surprise. The creature obeyed instantly. Instead of continuing its charge, the orc planted its foot hard, shifting its immense weight to the side. Choco stared in disbelief, questioning why he would issue a command that contradicted the initial attack. Its powerful stomp shattered the ground, the feint successfully breaking her defensive posture. She realized the initial movement had been a deliberate misdirection. She grit her teeth in frustration, refusing to be underestimated. She knew that if she allowed the orc to continue its acceleration, it would simply overpower her. The creature's shadow loomed, a testament to its raw power. As she braced herself, her attention was suddenly drawn to a new movement on the battlefield. To her astonishment, the summoner himself was now sprinting towards her. She watched him close the distance, completely bewildered. She wondered why he would choose to fight directly, noting that he was still well outside of effective attack range. He ignored her confusion, his expression hardening with focus as he issued another one-word command: accelerate. The word struck her with the force of a physical blow. Her eyes widened in sudden, horrified realization. She had been completely outmaneuvered. She finally understood the depth of the deception. This, too, was nothing more than a bluff. Following its master's command, the orc thunders forward, its immense weight shaking the ground as it completes its charge. She watches the creature rush past, realizing with a start that if the blow had connected, it would have been a fatal one. Brought to one knee by the summoner's successful feint, Choco looks up at him from the cracked earth and asks if he is ready to admit his victory. She leaps to her feet, angrily demanding to know if he can use the acceleration ability. Susaku calmly denies it, stating that he possesses no combat power himself and that she shouldn't expect him to have an ability like hers. He thinks to himself that he won the match fairly. He continues, explaining that he only shouted, "Accelerate," and charged forward himself as a sudden tactic to confuse her and disrupt her movements. He then reveals that even his very first command was a bluff. The actual order was given mentally. Choco reacts with fury, calling him despicable and insisting that if he had simply attacked her from the start, she would have won. Despite her frustration, she concedes that a victory is a victory. With a blush of embarrassment, she admits her defeat for this round and acknowledges his genuine skill. She reflects on the battle, her expression turning serious. The key to it all, she realizes, was that from the very beginning, the summoner never allowed her to take the most optimal action. Her own tactics were simple: a powerful, accelerating strike with her greatsword. In a straightforward fight, she would have been superior. But the summoner used bluffs to force her into making a judgment call instead. Constantly forced to react and with her actions restricted, Choco was unable to fight her own battle. This inability to seize the initiative was the ultimate cause of her defeat. A young woman with long, light hair observes from a distance, her expression thoughtful. She considers the man before her, realizing he is far more capable than she anticipated and might just be useful for her plan. The man, Susaku Kamafuda, formally states his name. A tiny fairy perched on his head remarks on its strangeness. Choco, who had demanded his name, seems to recognize it, though she can't quite place it. Susaku confirms his name, adding that it's the one he was given at the start. Her frustration boils over. She grabs him by the suit, shouting that he had no right to call her Otome as if he were some great summoner. Despite her anger, she quickly pivots, declaring that if he's going to cooperate, he will work tirelessly to help her explore a dungeon. The long-haired woman observes their exchange with a gentle smile, noting that this is a perfect chance to clear up the misunderstanding about him being a summoner. Choco, however, seems to cling to the idea, remarking that with the legendary summoner on their side, their strength would be immense. He looks utterly lost by their conversation, asking aloud what he is supposed to do. He then turns to them for clarification, wanting to know what, specifically, exploring a dungeon involves. The mage explains that a dungeon is certainly located within this forest, a dangerous place that a summoner should be able to handle. She formally asks him to join their fight. A wide, strained grin spreads across Susaku's face as he realizes correcting their misconception is no longer an option. The thought of having to fight in a forest swarming with monsters fills his mind. Huddled within the dense foliage of a forest, the party watches from cover. The swordsman, Choco, peers through a spyglass and, after a moment of searching, confirms their target is in sight. There it is, she murmurs. Her spyglass is aimed at the ominous entrance to a dungeon, a dark maw formed by gnarled, ancient tree roots. A stone path leads down a staircase into the subterranean blackness, emanating an aura of palpable danger. The summoner, Susaku Kamafuda, sighs with exhaustion, pinching the bridge of his nose. He reflects on the grueling search. It had taken them an entire day to locate the dungeon's entrance, a task made all the more taxing by his companion's heavy reliance on him. He turns to the others, voicing his apprehension about what lies ahead. "Is this really okay?" he asks. In response, Choco eagerly prepares for battle, declaring her readiness to proceed, while the mage, Otome, watches with a more reserved expression. This disagreement had begun earlier. Choco had passionately argued that since a dungeon had appeared in a known monster spawning ground, they had to explore it immediately. She reminded Otome of her past trauma of being attacked by an orc, but Otome had firmly stated her opposition, warning that the forest itself was a natural labyrinth and that entering without a plan was a fool's errand. She had insisted they proceed with caution, suggesting they take at least a month to carefully map the terrain as they went. Her proposal was met with Choco's furious disbelief. "A month? Are you serious?" she had shouted, arguing that other adventurers would surely claim the dungeon by then. Otome calmly retorted that while courage is admirable in a warrior, recklessness is not. It was better to be cautious than to die for nothing. The argument had devolved into insults, with Choco calling Otome a coward and Otome labeling Choco a simpleton. Susaku, seeing the rising tension, had stepped between them to intervene. He cut through their bickering by producing a rolled-up parchment. "I have a map," he announced, explaining that he was already familiar with the topography of the forest surrounding the village. He unrolls the map for them, pointing out that it contains information on paths and even monster locations. With this tool, he assures them, their search for the dungeon should be much more manageable. He calmly tells his companions to stop their bickering. The mage, Otome, expresses her admiration for the summoner's preparedness, while the swordsman, Choco, frustratedly demands to know why he didn't reveal the map sooner. With the dispute settled, they stand before the entrance to the forest dungeon. The protagonist explains that while he doesn't have a precise location for the labyrinth's entrance, he knows of a place nearby that strong monsters tend to avoid. He reasons that the monsters become stronger closer to the entrance, so they should head there. Having found it, they now face the dark maw of the cavern. Just as they prepare to enter, the ground trembles violently as a massive, bare foot slams down directly in their path. The foot belongs to a hulking, single-horned ogre, leading a menacing horde of monsters that has suddenly appeared. Among them are other horned beasts and a mysterious cloaked figure. The swordsman's face hardens as she recognizes the threat, declaring that they must defeat this ogre mob to proceed. The mage's gaze, however, fixes on the unsettling figure shrouded in dark rags. From the deep shadows of its hood, two white eyes glow ominously. She silently wonders what it could be. In response to the ambush, the protagonist raises a single card, his expression resolute. He announces that it is time to proceed according to the plan. The swordsman acknowledges the strategy with a sharp cry. Her eyes narrow with focus as she invokes her power with a single word, acceleration. She vanishes in a blur of motion, instantly felling one of the ogres. As the creature falls, she explains that her unique talent, acceleration, is the power to freely alter her own speed. Moving faster than the eye can follow, she thinks to herself that no one can keep up with her. In a one-on-one fight, she is absolutely unbeatable. The word acceleration echoes in her mind as she launches her next attack. With another blindingly fast strike, she decapitates a second monster. She scoffs, declaring that a plan is unnecessary. She will handle the remaining 3 by herself. She pressed her attack, her blade clashing against the muscular arm of a horned ogre. The monster grunted, bracing against the impact as the swordsman pushed forward with fierce determination. In response, the ogre swung a massive wooden club, which she deftly blocked with her sword. From the edge of the forest, the mage recognized the faint glow around the creature's body as a form of earth magic. The mage called out a warning to her companion, Choco, telling her she had advanced too far. She explained that the monster was using fortification magic, a spell that hardened its body, which took the swordsman by surprise. The ogre's magically enhanced limb smashed down with incredible force, shattering the ground where the swordsman had been standing just a moment before. Meanwhile, the summoner stepped forward into the clearing. Seeing 2 ogres and a cloaked figure standing over a fallen monster, he noted that 2 remained and calmly beckoned them forward. He raised a single card, his expression hardening with resolve. With a powerful declaration, he summoned a new creature to the field, a giant ogre. Watching from the trees, the mage was astonished. She observed that the summoned ogre was significantly larger than its card form. Realizing that this amplification must be the summoner's unique talent. The summoned warrior, clad in samurai-like armor, let out a fearsome roar, drawing its twin katanas as it faced down the remaining monstrous foe. With blinding speed, the giant ogre lunged forward, its eyes glowing with menace as it closed the distance in an instant. The battle was over. The enemy ogres lay in pieces across the clearing. Amidst the carnage, the cloaked figure stood motionless and unharmed, a silent observer to the swift and brutal victory. As the dust settled, the cloaked figure clutched its robes, a sudden premonition of a powerful enemy seizing it. Nearby, Susaka Kamafuda assessed his situation. With his newly summoned samurai ogre standing guard, he noted that only a single card remained in his hand. His gaze narrowed with concentration, a hint of uncertainty in his eyes as he contemplated his next move. A colossal guardian blocks the path forward within the dungeon labyrinth. The party looks up in awe and apprehension at the towering figure. Is the king ogre the strongest of its kind, its immense, muscular form radiating power? Without hesitation, Choco the swordsman bursts into action. Declaring that the first strike is essential for victory, she launches herself forward, a blur of motion dashing toward the beast. Her blade flashes as she unleashes an accelerate skill, but the king ogre reacts with impossible speed, raising a massive shield and completely deflecting the blow. The sheer force of the impact sends her reeling backward through the air, her powerful attack utterly negated. As she recovers, Otome the mage recognizes that the ogre successfully defended and prepares her own assault, beginning the incantation for earth magic. The ogre counters instantly, slamming its fist into the ground and raising a massive earthen barrier to block the spell. But then, with a deafening roar, the king ogre shatters the very wall it created. Otome stares in shock, realizing the creature has 4 arms and a cache of weapons on its back. The memory of the encounter is fresh as the group discusses their next move. Otome asks Susaku if they should retreat, but he firmly refuses. He instructs her to stick to the plan they made the day before, declaring that he will buy them the time they need. He elaborates by the campfire, explaining that they now understand each other's talents well enough to establish a proper strategy. His goal, he says, is to learn the characteristics of the powerful monsters lurking deep in the forest. Otome summarizes his intent with a single word: hunting. He continues, explaining that as monsters grow stronger, they acquire a diverse range of abilities. This evolution transforms their behavior into something more cunning and predatory. It becomes a true hunt. He sat by the campfire with his companions, contemplating their next move. This situation, he mused, might be to their advantage. He turned his attention to the mage, Otome, noting that her talent for magic could prove to be quite useful in the coming fight. His plan involved combining dark magic, which binds objects, with grass magic. He explained to a surprised Choco that her high applicability would be central to their tactics, praising her incredible destructive power as a key asset. With these elements combined, he declared with grim determination, they could finally formulate a strategy effective against even a powerful monster. The plan was put into motion. As the samurai ogre charged the massive king ogre, Susaku watched intently, confirming that this was a feint to buy time for Otome's preparations. The king ogre, however, simply sneered at the approaching warrior. The samurai warrior lunged forward, but the king ogre effortlessly parried the twin sword attack with 2 of its 4 powerful arms, bringing the assault to a dead stop. Before the samurai could react, the king ogre countered with overwhelming force, swatting him aside and sending him reeling through the air. He landed hard, defeated. Susaku watched in disbelief, realizing the king ogre had won the exchange without even utilizing all of its arms. The king ogre's attention then shifted. It had identified the defenseless summoner as its next target, but Choco, using her accelerate skill, launched herself through the air to intercept. Susaku watched in alarm, realizing the monster's aim was the rear guard and questioning what he could do against such a threat. She streaked past the monster's head, her blade missing its mark. Landing gracefully, she grit her teeth in frustration, having aimed for its neck. The king ogre simply glanced down, unimpressed by the attempt. Seeing her vulnerable, Susaku called out, announcing that he had come to her aid and had re-evaluated their opponent. The 4-armed king ogre looked down at the pair, a flicker of surprise on its brutish face. His new assessment was put into motion instantly. As the king ogre lunged, a rock sailed through the air and struck it squarely in the face, the impact staggering the colossal beast. The projectile was a successful diversion. From a safe distance, Otome had thrown the stone, drawing the king ogre's furious, glowing gaze towards her. Seizing the opportunity, Choco shouted a challenge, beckoning the monster to come her way. She declared that her preparations were complete, and the massive creature began to turn, its heavy footfalls shaking the ground. As it took a step towards her, the ground beneath it suddenly gave way. The king ogre roared in surprise as it plunged into a deep, hidden pitfall. From her vantage point, Otome watched the plan unfold perfectly. Her grass magic had concealed the trap, ensnaring the giant ogre at the bottom of the chasm. Before the beast could recover, the samurai ogre leaped into the pit, its twin blades flashing to deliver the final blow. With the battle won, Susaku secured its essence, capturing the king ogre card. With the threat neutralized, the party regrouped. Otome smiled, congratulating everyone on the great success of their pitfall strategy. He turned his attention to Choco, carefully applying a bandage to a wound on her forehead. Otome explained that she had used earth and grass magic to create the trap, pleased that their plan to lure the ogre had worked. Despite the blood on her face, Choco insisted she had done her part, though she trembled with exhaustion. Susaku then asked what they should do now. Otome suggested that since the entrance obstacle was cleared, they should rest, pointing out that Choco was the most injured. The swordsman immediately objected, shouting that she couldn't possibly rest now. She insisted they must enter the dungeon at once. Otome calmly countered that they should proceed with caution. Watching their argument, Susaku sighed to himself. The road ahead was already fraught with difficulty, and now, having just found the entrance, he wondered if they were already starting to fight amongst themselves. Caught in the middle of a tense clearing, Susaku Kamifuda finds himself accosted from both sides. The swordsman, Choco, demands to know who he is, while the magic user, Otome, insists he decide which of them is right. Visibly stressed, Susaku pushes a hand out, questioning why he's being dragged into what he considers a childish squabble. His plea is ignored. The bearded man steps in, declaring that Susaku is the adult and must therefore decide on a course of action. Internally, the bearded man fumes, wondering how he should respond to being treated as the responsible one only when it's convenient for the others. Before he can voice his thoughts, the swordsman Choco whirls around and strikes him with a resounding crack, screaming for him to die. Unfazed by the violence, Susaku watches with a weary smile, thinking to himself that any non-committal answer would be bad for everyone involved. The bearded man recovers, realizing that Choco is not someone to be trifled with. A dark premonition flashes through Susaku's mind, a chilling thought. Next time, Susaku dies, his expression hardening, The bearded man concludes that the argument itself is a grave mistake. He knows they cannot afford to divide their strength at such a critical moment. His thoughts drift to Isekai'd, standing flanked by two powerful werewolves. He recalls the principle that there is strength in numbers, and that they should be acting like adults instead of fighting amongst themselves. Yet he hesitates. He questions whether he can really say such things in front of the girls, especially considering the taboo surrounding teenage girls and the demon core. He realizes that any word from him could cause the team to collapse entirely. As this thought crosses his mind, Isekai'd stands silently in the rain, his back to Choco, gazing at a large, board game-like structure in the distance. The silence is broken by Choco. With a sigh of resignation, she declares that she has had enough. She announces her decision. She will go into the dungeon alone. As she turns to leave, Isekai'd spins around in alarm. "Wait," he shouts, reaching out a hand. He warns her that going by herself is far too dangerous. He stood before the resolute swordsman, Choco, who broke the silence. She confessed that she had started to acknowledge him, but her tone was laced with disappointment. Her trust shattered. She drew her sword with a furious cry, declaring that she could not trust anyone and would face the floor boss alone. Her declaration sent a wave of panic through him. He internally recoiled at the sight of a score in the teens, realizing the odds were catastrophically low. As she descended into the dungeon's maw without a backward glance, he frantically wondered what to do, knowing he had to follow her. Before he could give chase, the mage Otome's voice cut in. She calmly stated that while Choco's actions were reckless, her stubbornness would keep her alive for a while. She then turned her attention to him, questioning his overly stoic demeanor. He covered his face in frustration, lamenting that if he had just explained himself properly, the situation could have been avoided. Otome observed him, realizing with some surprise that he had indeed been thinking things through and hadn't intended to argue about their respective strengths. Seeing his distress, she began to explain her perspective. She noted that mages typically focus solely on their magic, often making them unreliable when it comes to teamwork and broader strategy. She then offered him a genuine compliment, smiling warmly as she told him he was different from an ordinary mage. She called him amazing, addressing him respectfully as summoner. Taken aback, he could only manage a simple word of thanks. Emboldened, she moved closer, gently touching his cheek. She confessed that she had been interested in him ever since they met, sensing that he was different from ordinary people, that he was extraordinary. Her touch and her words left him flustered as she held his gaze and softly called his title once more. Leaning in close, Otome whispers an intense question directly into his ear. "Who are you, really?" He is taken aback. His mind flashes back to her comments about his strange clothes and his use of summoning without incantations. He realizes she's questioning if he's even a real summoner. As she holds his chin, forcing him to look at her, he internally debates how to respond. Should he confess that he's from another world? A small, knowing smile forms on her lips. Her face suddenly darkens, her eyes glowing ominously as she declares that she understands now. This is his weak point. The abrupt shift in her demeanor sends a chill through Isekai'd. She tells him it's all right. She won't press him any further on the matter. However, she confirms with a sly smile. She has her answer. With a soft, triumphant expression, she leans closer and declares that his secret has been exposed. She continues, suggesting that sharing secrets is what deepens the bond between a man and a woman. She proposes that they become good friends, addressing him familiarly as summoner. Isekai'd remains silent, processing her bold move. He breaks the tension with a smirk, apologizing in advance. He points out that her attempt to act mature is a bit embarrassing to watch, like a child overextending themselves. Otome flinches, her composure instantly shattering as a blush spreads across her face. She bursts out laughing, completely flustered, and demands to know what he means by embarrassing. He stammers, trying to explain that it's a feeling people their age get when they see someone trying too hard to act like an adult. Still trembling with laughter, she admits that his reaction was a little funny, but she finds that side of him quite charming. As she recovers from her flustered amusement, Isekai'd continues his teasing with a bright, reassuring smile. He tells her it's all right, insisting she doesn't need to force herself to act like an adult because children should be allowed to be children. His words strike a nerve. Blushing furiously, she bares a set of sharp teeth and shouts for him to be quiet, retorting that he is the one who is an old man. He laughs off the insult, arguing that 30 isn't old yet. His casualness only enrages her further, and she insists that 30 is definitely old enough to be considered an old man. Growing dizzy from the exchange, she mutters his name, followed by the insult, vowing to never call him summoner again. Pointing an accusatory finger, she declares that from now on, he will be known as Old Man So, a title she deems utterly pathetic. As he collapses to his knees in mock defeat, she demands to know why someone like him had to be brought to this world at all. Her outburst causes the light-hearted atmosphere to vanish. Isekai'd's expression turns serious as he looks up from the ground. He remarks that otherworlder girls seem to have a low boiling point, before asking her why Choco had gotten so angry earlier. He glances away, and she questions his obliviousness, asking if he really hadn't noticed the reason. She explains plainly that Choco was upset precisely because he, Old Man So, had remained silent and said nothing at all. The realization hits him. He had misinterpreted Choco's silence, assuming she had no interest in him when she didn't argue or agree. He now understands that was the very reason she left. She presses him further, demanding to know why he kept quiet when he clearly had his own thoughts on the matter. She asks if it was a calculated act of adult self-preservation, before asserting that a direct, honest argument can be a form of affection. He looks down, conceding internally that she is correct. He admits to himself that he remained silent out of a desire for self-preservation, but now realizes that very choice is what invited the current crisis. He knelt, his resolve hardening. He declared his intention to go to the dungeon, stating that he had to apologize to her. Standing over him, Otome questioned his motives, asking if he wasn't just bullying a child by going to such lengths. Elsewhere, at the mouth of the cavern, another of their former companions looked back, stating defiantly that he wouldn't be going. He was an adult, after all. Meanwhile, Choco ventured alone into the overgrown entrance of a dungeon. She looked around with disappointment, thinking to herself that it was all rather anticlimactic. This was hardly a dungeon at all. Her thoughts were interrupted by a weak-looking monster. She scoffed at the creature, noting that even the small fry she'd encountered were pathetic. She felt confident she could clear the first floor entirely on her own. Her expression hardened with resolve. She remembered how she had trusted someone, but now she would trust no one. From this point forward, she would fight alone. Venturing deeper into the cavern, she was suddenly alerted to a new threat. Ahead, a group of goblins lurked in the shadows, their grotesque faces turning towards her as one spotted her approach. She dismissed them as more small fry, easily handled. With a swift movement, she lunged to attack, but her blade clanged against an unseen surface. To her shock, she realized she had struck a wall. From the darkness beyond the invisible barrier, 3 goblins advanced, brandishing their crude weapons, a spear and a bow, ready to strike. Realizing the danger posed by the archer, she decided to close the distance instantly to take them all out at once. She pushed off the ground, accelerating into a charge. Her charge came to a violent halt as she slammed into the invisible wall once more, the impact throwing her backward. Disoriented, she could only question what this barrier was. She stumbles, realizing with dawning horror that the recoil from her greatsword striking the invisible barrier sent her flying. The narrow confines of the dungeon offer little room to maneuver as the goblins swarm forward. Before she can fully recover, a sharp impact strikes her forehead. A rock, hurled by one of the advancing goblins, finds its mark, stunning her as the horde closes in with guttural cries. Pushing through the pain and dizziness, she scrambles to her feet and sprints away, desperately seeking an escape from the relentless creatures. She races through the rocky passage, but the path seems to lead nowhere, trapping her within the dungeon's unforgiving, twisting corridors. Her stamina finally gives out. Slumped against a cold stone wall, she gasps for breath, reasoning that if she stays in the shadows, their attacks won't reach her. She tries to reassure herself, repeating that she'll be fine, that she can fight alone. But the brave words are a lie. Tears stream down her face, her expression a mask of despair and fear, betraying her crumbling resolve. Her mind drifts back to a conversation with Susaku. She recalls explaining to him that she understood the situation intellectually, and that it wasn't something worth getting angry over. She had continued, admitting that even so, as she silently watched him, she couldn't suppress the irritation that grew from feeling unneeded and useless. That very feeling has led to this result. Huddled alone in the darkness, she laments her fate, questioning why she always ends up so helpless on her own. Her moment of self-pity is cut short. The guttural chattering of the goblin mob echoes from the cave entrance as they finally corner their prey. Her head snaps up as a strange sound cuts through the goblin snarls. Reinforcements? She wonders, a flicker of hope piercing her despair. But from where? The source of the sound was not the clash of friendly steel, but the dry, chilling rattle of beads against bone. It was a staff, held aloft by a figure emerging from the deeper gloom of the cave. Flanked by its leering goblin minions, a tall, unsettling shaman stepped forward, its skull standard announcing its grim authority. Its gaze was fixed and unnerving, a mask of cold malice. The rattling of its staff was the sound of despair itself, echoing through the dungeon's oppressive silence. Deep within a cavern, the swordsman Choco finds herself cornered, her face etched with terror. Before her stands a gaunt, menacing goblin shaman, flanked by its emaciated minions, a situation of absolute despair. Elsewhere, the magic user Otome urgently leads Susaku Kamifuda up a set of stone stairs, calling out for the old man to hurry. He follows, a bead of sweat on his temple, his expression grim and determined. Having descended into the labyrinth, she turns to him as they walk through a dark passage. She asks how he intends to search for Choco now that they have arrived. Her tone sharpens as she confronts him directly. She admonishes him for his recklessness and lack of a plan, stating that it's an adult's responsibility to be prepared. She questions if he's some kind of jackknife, using his words to hurt everyone. In response, he reveals his strategy, presenting a card from his deck. He explains that he intends to use the werewolf card, postulating that its keen sense of smell might be able to track Choco down. He considers the card's properties. While monsters converted to cards possess special abilities, this one provides no details, only a name and an illustration. With no other option, he summons the creature. A massive werewolf materializes before them. Susaku declares that he will have to infer the card's abilities and commands the beast to search for Choco. The summoned creature immediately lowers its head, sniffing the ground before loping forward, having caught a trail. Relieved, Susaku confirms to Otome that his plan was a success. As they follow, however, his thoughts turn grim. He realizes that if Choco has encountered a monster, the narrow confines of this dungeon are a major disadvantage. They must find her quickly, especially if her opponent is powerful. He glances at the card in his hand, a seed of doubt planted in his mind. He worries that this card alone might not be enough to be of any real use. Meanwhile, deep within the dungeon, a sinister gathering convenes. A gaunt, long-nosed goblin shaman, holding a staff topped with a human skull, stands at the mouth of a cave, flanked by his small, brutish minions. The shaman issues a guttural command, his words unintelligible, but his intent clear, his wide eyes fixed on an unseen target. His target is the captured swordsman, Choco. Blindfolded and cornered, she observes her captor, recognizing him as a type of goblin she has never encountered before. She spots her greatsword lying nearby. Realizing that if she is to retrieve it, she must act now. She resolves to launch a swift attack. But as she prepares to move, the shaman raises his staff and begins a strange incantation. The surrounding goblins begin to twitch and groan, their bodies contorting as Choco looks on in alarm. The magic takes hold. The goblins' muscles swell and expand, their frames growing larger and more powerful under the shaman's influence. She stares in wide-eyed shock, unable to believe what she is seeing. The goblins have been magically enlarged. Before she can process the transformation, the enhanced creatures charge with incredible speed. One of them swings a massive fist, catching her in a devastating blow that sends her flying. She crashes hard against the cavern floor, gasping for air. The strength behind that punch was unbelievable, rivaling that of an orc. Standing over his victorious minions, the shaman reveals the nature of his power. It is an enhancement magic, a spell he used to strengthen the goblins. He sneered, his face contorted in a wicked grin. The shaman gloated that the once puny goblin had been transformed into a true monster. As he spoke, his creation demonstrated its newfound power. The enhanced goblin's massive hand clamped down on the swordsman Choco's head, its grip tightening with immense force as she lay helpless on the ground. She cried out in agony and disbelief, unable to comprehend how a mere goblin could possess such overwhelming strength. She screamed for it to release her. Her struggles were futile. A horrifying realization washed over her as she stared up at her captor. Was she truly going to die in a place like this, at the hands of such a creature? The goblin effortlessly lifted her into the air, her body limp in its grasp, her mind filled with regret, lamenting that if only she had suppressed her anger and been more obedient, she might have avoided this fate. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the blood from the wound on her forehead. A desperate plea formed in her thoughts. She didn't want to die, not like this. She hated it. She prayed for anyone to help. Her silent cry echoed in the darkness. Someone help me. And in that moment, an answer came. A powerful kick sent the enhanced goblin staggering back, its grip on Choco broken. Susaku Kamafuda had arrived. Behind him, the magic user Otome watched with wide-eyed relief, exclaiming that he had made it just in time. Before the swordsman Choco, a headless goblin collapses to the ground. She catches her breath, expressing relief that it was a close call. As she recovers, she recalls having fought a werewolf once before and managing to drive it away. Now, with death seemingly imminent, new allies have appeared. Looking up with renewed determination, she tells them to leave the rest to her and her group. The summoner, Susaku, stands beside the large, dark-furred werewolf. He declares that it is an adult's duty to protect the young, then commands his companion, "Let's go, werewolf." The werewolf leaps into the fray, its powerful claws tearing through a goblin minion with savage force. It recoils suddenly, a fresh bandage appearing on its head. The creature is shocked by the goblin's unexpected strength. Behind it, Susaku questions if their foes are truly just goblins. Nearby, Choco shouts at her companion, calling him a fool. She explains that these are not ordinary goblins. They have been magically enhanced. Her companion looks on, surprised by the revelation. Susaku understands the situation. The goblin shaman is using magic to strengthen its minions. If that's the case, he will counter with a summon of his own. He presents a new card, and as Choco watches in disbelief, a second, white-furred werewolf materializes. The new werewolf finds itself immediately surrounded by the horde of enhanced goblins. The shaman scoffs, believing that simply adding more bodies to the fight will not secure a victory. But the two werewolves fight back-to-back, a synchronized whirlwind of claws and fangs that cuts down the goblin attackers with ease. Susaku watches with a calm, knowing expression. Just as I predicted, he remarks. Choco can only stare, wide-eyed and utterly astonished by the unfolding strategy. He revealed his strategy. Two distinct types of werewolf cards existed. They were designed as a two-card set, and he had anticipated the powerful effect they would unleash when used in tandem. Together, the two werewolves could unleash their true power. The dark-furred male and the light-furred female stood back-to-back, a perfect pairing of combo cards ready for battle. As the werewolves prepared to strike, the cards of the defeated goblins fluttered to the ground around the stunned goblin shaman. Susaku watched, a wave of relief washing over him as he realized his prediction was correct. The shaman, recovering his composure, pointed a bony finger forward. He issued a challenge, declaring that to eliminate the threat, They would have to defeat him directly. In response, Susaku gave a command. Understood. Wolf, he shouted, and the white werewolf acknowledged, lunging forward to engage the enemy. The creature moved with blinding speed, a white streak that closed the distance to the shaman in an instant, her claws poised to strike. The battle was over in a flash. With the threat neutralized, Susaku now held a newly acquired Goblin Shaman card. From the ground where she sat, Choco looked up at him, asking what he had found so amusing. Her voice was filled with frustration and hurt. She furiously questioned how he could laugh when she had been on the verge of death. Calling herself an idiot for understanding his reasoning, she told him to just blame her for her recklessness if he wished. Faced with her anger, Susaku bowed his head low. I'm sorry, he exclaimed, taking full responsibility. It was my fault. Choco stared, momentarily stunned into silence by his sincere apology. He continued, his voice heavy with remorse. He confessed that when she had asked for his decision earlier, he had remained silent, afraid of the responsibility and the possibility of her getting hurt. He admitted that his hesitation was what ultimately put her in danger. He bows deeply before the kneeling Choco, declaring himself a failure as an adult and offering a profound apology for his actions. His words leave her utterly stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stammers, unable to form a coherent response. Her shock gives way to frantic confusion, her eyes swirling as she questions why a grown man would bow his head to her like this. The very concept is alien to her. In her world, an adult bowing to a child is an act that defies all social order. The meaning is completely lost on her. As Choco reels from the cultural shock, the magic user, Otome, intervenes. She tells Susaku to stop, explaining that he's induced a state of stun or confusion in Choco, and that his recent exchange was the cause of her panic. She then turns her attention to the still-dazed swordsman, urging her to respond. Otome reminds her that an adult is humbling himself before her and that she should have something to say. Prodded by her companion, Choco lowers her gaze, a blush spreading across her cheeks. She quietly admits that she understands and that she was also at fault. She then looks up, trying to explain the gravity of his actions from her perspective. She declares that he must have no pride, as for a noble to bow their head would mean their lands would be invaded and their clan annihilated. For a single offense, she explains, 100 punishments would be dealt in return. Despite her harsh words, Susaku feels a sense of relief that the tension has broken. But as he relaxes, his attention is drawn to the back of his hand, where a glowing, intricate symbol has suddenly appeared. The symbol suddenly flares with intense energy, and he cries out as a searing heat spreads through his right hand, comparing the burning sensation to an overheating foam. He stared down at the card in his hand, the searing pain from the symbol on his other hand subsiding. To his astonishment, he could now make out some of the card's text, something that had been impossible just moments before. His confusion mounted. Why could he suddenly read the text that was unreadable before? He wondered if his eyesight had somehow been corrected, as if he'd undergone a procedure. The answer came not from his own reasoning, but as a sudden, clear thought that cut through his confusion. It wasn't an illusion. The conditions for a level up had been fulfilled. As the realization settled, the glowing symbol on the back of his hand solidified into a distinct Roman numeral, 2. A voice confirmed his new status, level 2. He now understood. This was the reason he could read the previously indecipherable text. The common wisdom that there's no room for growth after 30 was being challenged before his very eyes. He looked up, a mixture of shock and disbelief on his face. I leveled up? He exclaimed, the reality of it sinking in. At 30 years old, a new path of growth had just opened up before him. Susaku Kamafuda, a middle-aged card gamer, stared at his werewolf card in disbelief. The text, once unreadable, was now perfectly clear. He clenched his fist, shocked to have leveled up at his age. This realization came to him within a dark, cavernous maze. He understood that by fighting here, he had gained a level, and with it, the ability to comprehend more of his cards. His tactical options would expand greatly. He examined another card, an ogre, noting that some text remained a mystery. He mused that with more levels, he might decipher them all. His concentration was broken when a voice called out, Susaku, what are you spacing out for? The sharp question came from two young women. One, a swordswoman named Choco, warned him not to come any closer. Beside her, a magic user named Otome looked on, startled. Game-like statistics materialized, showing Choco at 1800/1200 and Otome at 1600/1000. Choco turned to face him directly, her expression questioning. She asked if he could see people's statuses, remarking that this world was just like a game. Her words sparked a thought in his mind. If he could see theirs, could he see his own? As the women began to walk away, a sharp sound confirmed his suspicion. He had just used a skill, status peak. The result of his new ability appeared before him, and he recoiled in horror. His own status was a pitiful 300/200. He cried out, aghast at his weakness, realizing that his weakest monster had been further debilitated. Choco looked back, confused by his outburst. Her companion, Otome, suddenly cried out to her, pointing at the man on the ground. She warned that he was assuming a combat stance. Her warning was timely, as from a dark passage ahead, a creature's voice echoed. It was a goblin, shouting that there were still remnants of their enemies around. The small horde of creatures emerged fully, their pale bodies and pointed ears distinct in the gloom. Susaku and his two new companions stood ready, facing the goblin threat together. His eyes widened as the status of the approaching goblins filled his vision. Their power levels varied, but they were all formidable. He realized that his ability allowed him to see the stats of monsters, noting the slight variations between each individual. If that was the case, he had to figure out how to use this knowledge. He considered the goblin card in his hand, which listed an attack power of 500. He wondered if his ability was meant to weaken the creatures by turning them into cards, but that seemed pointless given his recent level up. But as he examined the card more closely, he saw text describing an effect to raise the attack power of a goblin on the field. Meanwhile, his companions grew impatient. The magic user, Otome, pointed out that even with the shaman defeated, more goblins were swarming from the cave. She turned to Isekai'd, who was holding up the card, and urged him to hurry up and attack. As if spurred by her cry, a single goblin broke from the horde, charging directly toward the seemingly defenseless Isekai'd. The two women watched in alarm. The swordswoman, Choco, scoffed in disbelief, exclaiming that there was no way he could win against even one of those small fry goblins. But the creature did not strike him. Instead, it swung its club in a ferocious arc, smashing into its own allies and sending them flying. The sudden betrayal left Choco speechless. She stared, aghast, questioning how one goblin had just defeated 3 others at once when they were all the same. He, however, understood perfectly. His ability hadn't just allowed him to read the goblin's status. It had applied the card's effect, empowering the creature and turning it against its own kind. His gambit paid off. The empowered goblin, now significantly larger and stronger, turned on its former brethren with savage fury, its attack power more than doubling from 500 to 1100. He watched with grim satisfaction, realizing that if he could understand a card's effect, he could win against even superior numbers. He commanded his new minion forward, shouting for his goblin to attack. But his triumph was short-lived. After felling one of its own, his goblin's power waned, its attack strength dropping from 1100 to 800. He cried out in dismay as he saw it had been weakened, while the remaining goblins stood their ground. Seeing the tide turn once more, the swordswoman, Choco, declared that they were no mere small fry. With a determined cry, she leaped into the fray, her blade a blur as she cut down the remaining monsters. As the immediate threat subsided, he contemplated his strategy. He realized that the cards he had previously dismissed as weak could now become viable options, their effects creating new possibilities on the battlefield. He understood that a player's skill could unlock countless paths to victory. This was the true gift of his power, an expansion of possibilities, a chance to level up his own potential. His introspection was cut short when one of his companions called his name, urging him to look at a device. On its screen, the words "Level Up" glowed, confirming his recent growth. Meanwhile, the party had advanced deeper into the dungeon. Choco explained to Otome that a wall had crumbled, revealing a massive, sealed door. She surmised that this must be the chamber of the floor boss. He approached them, questioning the term floor boss. Choco confirmed his suspicions, stating that the path ahead was a dead end, meaning this chamber had to be the deepest part of the current floor. Otome then elaborated, her expression serious. She explained that a powerful monster, the floor boss, resides in the deepest part of the dungeon. Defeating this boss, she concluded, is the only way to clear the floor. She and her companions stood before the final door, but a grim possibility surfaced in Isekai'd's mind. The strength of a floor boss was on an entirely different level. A single misstep could lead to their complete annihilation, a vision of his own broken form lying amidst the fallen. Sensing his hesitation, the mage calmly asked what he intended to do. The swordwoman, however, was filled with fighting spirit, declaring that they had come this far and would naturally challenge the boss. The third warrior agreed, stating she was also prepared. He remained silent for a moment before admitting that, truthfully, he hadn't come this far for any grand purpose. His thoughts drifted to his past actions. He had always avoided the dangerous forest near the ruined village, content to live within the safe zone and fight only weak monsters. He glanced at the mark on his hand, the Roman numeral 2, a stark reminder that he had barely leveled up at all. A realization struck him with force. To level up, to truly become stronger, he had to fight powerful monsters. He could not accumulate the necessary combat experience otherwise. Turning back to his companions, he voiced his conclusion. He hadn't leveled up even once while fighting in the ruined village. This meant that if he didn't fight, if he stayed in the safe zone, he would never become strong. With newfound resolve, he strode forward. "Let's go," he declared, his voice firm. "I'll challenge the floor boss, too." As he walked toward the imposing doors, the swordswoman remarked that he was acting a bit childish, though a hint of a smile was on her face. The mage simply watched him go, her expression unreadable. His eyes burned with a fierce light, a single, powerful desire echoing in his mind. "I want to try getting stronger." He clenched his jaw, the thought solidifying into an unbreakable vow. "Ido." He pressed his hand against the immense doors, pushing them open with newfound determination. A new challenge awaited. It was time to go, time to defeat the floor boss. Before a colossal, heavily barred door set into a cavern wall, the party comes to a halt. The chronicle of their dangerous challenge begins here, as they prepare to face the floor boss that waits beyond. With grim determination, the summoner announces it is time to proceed. Before he can take a step, the short-haired warrior shoves him aside with surprising force. She yells at him to get out of her way, declaring fiercely that she will be the first one through the door. She slams her body against the immense gate, straining to push it open. With a roar, she proclaims that she will be the one to become the dungeon master. As she struggles, the summoner turns to the magic user, questioning the title. She explains that dungeon master is a designation given to the one who conquers the dungeon, granting them various privileges, such as restricting entry. He considers her words, realizing it means gaining effective control over the entire area. She elaborates that once a dungeon is discovered, people seeking treasure will gather, leading to development. If a dungeon master is established, they stand to gain immense wealth. The condition to become the dungeon master is simple. One must be the first to defeat the boss of the first floor. All the while, the warrior continues to strain against the unmoving gate. Understanding the stakes, the summoner asks if his companion is from a noble family. The magic user looks away, her expression pained, confirming that the warrior is desperately trying to restore her clan's honor. With a deep groan of metal and stone, the massive doors finally begin to give way. The magic user asks the summoner if he is truly all right with letting their companion claim the title. Now understanding her situation, he assures her that it's fine. The doors swing open to reveal the floor boss's chamber, a vast, crystalline cavern where mysterious brilliance glitters from every surface. Stepping inside, the summoner marvels at the beautiful yet dangerous-looking space. The magic user identifies the formations as magic crystals, a result of high-density magic crystallizing. Suddenly, the warrior freezes, her senses screaming that something is there. Her gaze settled on the center of the vast, crystalline chamber. There, resting atop a glittering pedestal of sharp crystals, was a single, large egg. She advanced cautiously, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword, the jagged crystals crunching under her boots. Behind her, the summoner and the mage observed from a safe distance. Suddenly, the egg began to crack. As the summoner wondered aloud if it was a small bird, a tiny creature with fiery wings burst forth, chirping loudly as it shattered its crystalline perch. The warrior stared, bewildered. She couldn't believe this tiny, chirping thing was the floor boss. For a moment, she thought it was too cute to be attacked. Her hesitation vanished, replaced by indignation. Roaring not to be underestimated, she launched herself forward, sword raised high to strike the creature down. Before her blade could connect, the small creature erupted in a violent explosion of dark energy, shattering the crystal pedestal and sending a shockwave through the cavern. She landed, stunned by the sudden blast. As tendrils of black smoke coiled in the air, she could only ask, What was that? The smoke cleared, revealing nothing but glittering dust where the creature had been. A question hung in the air. Had it simply ruptured, or had it self-destructed? The summoner suggested it might have been a defensive instinct. The warrior erupted in fury, screaming that it was absurd. To come all this way only for the boss to die so pointlessly was an insult. Her anger gave way to despair. She turned away, muttering that this meant she couldn't become the dungeon master. The summoner called out her name with concern, Choco-san. As the dust from the explosion settled, the mage, Otome, felt a sudden, overwhelming surge of magical power saturate the air. Her eyes widened in alarm as she realized the shattered magic crystal was the source of this immense energy. This raw magic began to coalesce, converting into pure electricity that arced violently through the cavern. From a safe distance, Susaku and the warrior Choco watched the spectacle unfold. Otome understood with growing dread that something new was being born from the chaos. The crackling energy rapidly took shape, forming the horned head and powerful torso of a colossal, draconic beast. Its massive legs, composed of solid lightning, slammed down onto the crystalline floor. With a final surge, the creature fully materialized, a terrifying dragon made of pure electrical power, its form arcing and pulsing with untamed energy. Reacting to the immediate threat, Otome began chanting an enhancement spell, Forte Grande, while the warrior Choco instinctively raised her shield, bracing against the immense pressure radiating from a new foe. The dragon's electrical aura flared, instantly incinerating a swarm of dark, vine-like tendrils that attempted to lash out at it. Otome stared up at the towering beast, realizing the hopelessness of their situation. Her magic couldn't possibly reach it from such a distance, and she knew her spells would be a poor match for its power. Beside him, Choco yelled out in frustration, demanding to know what was happening and how the small bird could have transformed into this monster. Trying to get a handle on the threat, Susaku focused his gaze and activated his appraisal skill. He learned its name, Razviox, but nothing more. A chilling realization washed over him. The creature's level was so high that his skill couldn't analyze it. They were completely outmatched. He and his companions are suddenly shielded as a new warrior appears, shouting for them to take cover behind a wall she conjures with earth magic. Crouching behind the hastily erected barrier, he grits his teeth in frustration, realizing that his recent level up means nothing in the face of such overwhelming power as the dragon's energy crackles violently against the magical defense. The colossal electric dragon, Razviox, gathers a blinding sphere of raw lightning, its roar drowned out by the sound of crackling energy as it prepares to strike. The warrior who created the wall watches the attack build, her expression grim. She realizes with dread that her defense might not be enough to withstand the blast. Her gaze hardens, A flicker of determination replaces her fear as she grips her massive sword. She plants her feet firmly on the broken ground, her great sword held at the ready. From behind the wall, a voice cries out her name in disbelief. Choco. Her focus remains unbroken. She knows she can succeed, for the sword she holds is Durandal, a family heirloom with the power to cleave through any magic. A memory of her father surfaces. He had told her that he would soon welcome a bride from a foreign land, and that the family's domain would one day be hers to inherit. With these words, he entrusted the great sword to her care. She had accepted the responsibility with a solemn vow. Her head bowed in respect as she answered, "Yes, father." Now, facing the electric beast, she raises the blade. This was the duty her father had entrusted to her, to wield the treasured sword of the Red Lotus family. She stood firm against the crackling sphere of lightning, her resolve hardening. For the honor of her father's name, she vowed that she would restore her family's legacy. With a grunt of effort, she met the electrical onslaught head-on. With a powerful roar, she called upon her father to lend her strength, channeling it into her great sword as she swung it towards the blinding energy. The massive blade, Durandal, sliced cleanly through the magical lightning, dispersing it harmlessly. From behind the earthen wall, Susaku and the other Choco watched in disbelief, the young man exclaiming that she had actually cut the light. With a final, forceful grunt, she completely deflected the attack, the residual energy sparking away from her as the dragon recoiled from the impact. Wasting no time, she broke into a sprint, charging across the ravaged landscape to close the distance between herself and the colossal beast of pure energy. As she ran, she analyzed the situation. The lightning strike was a form of magic. As long as her own magic, which fueled the sword's effect, did not run out, she could withstand the assault. If it did, she would be finished. Meanwhile, Susaku watched from his cover, his knuckles white as he gripped the earth wall. He felt a surge of shame, thinking how pathetic it was that he could only stand by and watch a girl fight all by herself. Out on the battlefield, the warrior Choco stood ready, her sword held defensively. She noticed a sudden change as the electric dragon seemed to hesitate, its relentless assault ceasing for a moment. The creature's energy flickered and dimmed. Seeing the attack had stopped, she immediately recognized her opportunity. This was her chance to counterattack. But her hope was instantly shattered. The dragon's body erupted in a blinding flash of light, unleashing a massive, omnidirectional wave of electrical power that engulfed the entire area. Her eyes widened in shock at the overwhelming display. She stands firm as the mage, Otome, observes the luminous phenomenon, realizing it's another self-destruction. Unfazed, the warrior declares that such an explosion won't be fatal and that she will press the attack. As she prepares to move, Susaku watches with grave concern, questioning if it's truly wise to be so unguarded. He wonders if the first explosion was just a defensive instinct, and why the creature has grown larger after regenerating. His eyes widen in sudden understanding. He sees the magic crystals shattering, overflowing with raw magic that is rapidly converting into electrical energy. A dreadful possibility dawns on him. The creature, Razviox, fully materializes from the surging power. Its nature becomes clear. It sacrifices a resource to inflict damage, then pays a cost to regenerate, becoming stronger in the process. He recognizes the pattern instantly, a familiar and terrifying mechanic. This is bad. Panic seizing him, he screams a warning to Choco to get away, identifying the creature as a self-destruction and strengthened type. The strategy is one he knows well from his card games. A classic archetype. A creature sacrifices itself to damage its surroundings, then regenerates, growing stronger based on the magic power expended in its revival. Returning to the present, his gaze falls upon the central crystal. The horrifying truth becomes apparent. It's absorbing the fragments from its own previous destruction as a resource, fueling its own empowerment. He screams again, understanding the terrifying cycle: self-destruction, regeneration, and strengthening, an infinite loop of escalating power. The second explosion was just a feint. He desperately pleads for her to flee, but it is too late. A blinding flash of energy erupts from the creature's core, engulfing the lone warrior in an immense, devastating blast. As the cataclysmic blast erupted, Susaku desperately pointed, shouting a warning. Reacting instantly, the magic user Otome began to chant, her expression grim as she identified the spell needed: Earth Convergence Magic. Her spell was a desperate attempt to counter the immense sphere of destructive energy that expanded outwards, a blinding white light that threatened to vaporize everything in its path. Behind a hastily erected wall of earth, the magic user held her ground, with Susaku bracing himself against the magical shield. Miraculously, the swordswoman Choco stood firm, having weathered the initial blast, her eyes wide with disbelief at the raw power unleashed. The torrent of energy began to coalesce, swirling violently around a dark, core-like object on the ground. Just as Susaku had feared, the hellish loop of self-destruction, regeneration, and strengthening had begun. In the aftermath of a colossal explosion, a desolate, cratered wasteland stretches out under a sky churning with dust and energy. The air itself seems to hum with the lingering might of the floor boss's overwhelming power. As the smoke begins to clear, the magic user approaches Susaku, asking if he is unharmed. He seems dazed, his attention fixed elsewhere as he murmurs Choco's name, searching for her amidst the debris. She looks up, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and confusion, her face smudged with dirt from the battle. Her gaze falls upon a massive, muscular creature kneeling before her, its spiky, light-toned hair uncannily similar to Sisaka's. She hesitantly identifies it, questioning if this is his orc. The creature's form begins to crack, its body glowing intensely from within as it prepares to disintegrate. As it crumbles into a pile of rock and dust, Choco cries out in alarm, asking if it is all right. She suddenly clutches her head, trembling in distress. The magic user asks what's wrong, but Sisako, recognizing the imminent danger, urgently shouts for them to get away at once. He stands back, observing the lingering energy in the air. He reasons that if the self-destruction destroyed the magic crystal, then the area should be saturated with its power. His expression shifts to one of dawning horror as the pieces click into place. He voices his terrible suspicion, stating that if his prediction is correct, then the floor boss will regenerate. A blinding flash of light erupts from the epicenter, confirming his fear. The creature's true nature is revealed, a cycle of self-destruction, regeneration, and strengthening. He watched as the creature revived, its form crackling with renewed energy. With each resurrection, it grew stronger. His suspicion hardened into certainty as the creature loomed larger than before. He realized his prediction had been correct. The floor boss's true ability was a cycle of self-destruction. He reasoned that since the subsequent explosion was larger than the first, the creature must be converting the power of the attacks used against it into the force of its own detonation. The mage, Otome, confirmed his theory aloud, adding a crucial detail. After detonating, the boss absorbed the shattered magic crystal from the surroundings to fuel its regeneration, growing stronger with each revival. It was a horrifying loop, a self-destructing, strengthening monster that fed on its own demise to endlessly amplify its power. The reality of their situation crashed down on the knight, Red Lotus. She urged them to flee, her voice tight with panic. The summoner turned to her, startled by her sudden loss of composure. As her words hung in the air, his summoned orc stepped forward. The creature's muscles tensed, and the air around it began to swirl into a violent vortex, gathering immense power. Seeing his summon's resolve, his own determination hardened. He grit his teeth, refusing to yield. His resolve, however, did nothing to quell the knight's terror. She clutched her head, screaming that she'd had enough of the dungeon, the boss, and even him. Her raw fear poured out in a desperate cry. She did not want to die. Her will to fight completely shattered. The knight, Choco, trembles, declaring that it's hopeless. The mage tries to get her attention, but the protagonist, looking towards the sealed exit, agrees they should retreat. Before they can move, a new form of the boss materializes, a dragon composed of crackling electricity. It gathers a blinding sphere of energy in its maw as the party looks on in horror. The electrical dragon unleashes its gathered power, firing a concentrated beam of pure energy directly at the dungeon's exit. The blast strikes the stone archway with immense force, causing the ceiling to collapse and completely seal the doorway under tons of rubble. Staring at the impassable rockfall, the protagonist realizes with a shock that their escape route has been cut off. They are trapped. He watches as the creature continues to absorb ambient energy, its form growing larger and more powerful by the second. With no other option, he draws a card and bellows a command, summoning a new warrior to the field, a powerful ogre clad in samurai armor, wielding 2 katanas. The summoned ogre charges to intercept the electrical beast as the protagonist shouts for it to create an opening so they can take cover. Behind the relative safety of the rubble, the mage asks what they should do now that their escape is blocked. The protagonist grimly confirms that they are cornered. He gazes at his Demon's Dragon card, considering his trump card. He knows it has a destructive resistance and should be able to withstand the floor boss's self-destruction and attacks. However, he realizes there is one concerning point. He clutched the card, his expression grim. The destructive power of this summon was an unknown quantity, its activation time uncertain. There were simply too many variables. Beside him, the armored warrior, Red Lotus, bowed her head in shame, apologizing and claiming everything was her fault. She continued her lament, confessing that she had rushed ahead, attempting to claim all the glory for herself. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out that she had failed to uphold her father's teachings, committing a shameful act. She repeated her apology, her voice thick with regret. As she wept, the mage, Otome, spoke with a calm, almost cold logic. She stated that it was a simple fact that Red Lotus had advanced too far for them to provide support. The protagonist seemed taken aback by her bluntness. Her tone shifted, however, as she declared that a path to victory still existed. Otome explained her strategy. If they could force the floor boss to self-destruct by depleting its mana, it would create their single greatest opportunity to strike. She elaborated that if they followed her instructions precisely, they could exhaust the creature. Just before its mana was completely gone, right before it self-destructed, they could land a single, decisive blow to win. The summoner questioned the plan, asking who would be the one to deliver that final attack. Otome turned, pointing a finger directly at him. She reminded him that he possessed the ultimate trump card, his dragon. With that, she placed the full weight of their survival on his shoulders. She declared emphatically that they would drain the boss's mana, and he alone, would finish it with a single, overwhelming strike. As the immense pressure settled upon him, the sealed gates stood as a grim backdrop, a constant reminder of their confinement, while the sounds of battle raged just beyond their small circle. There, the samurai ogre relentlessly clashed with the electric dragon, its blades meeting crackling energy in a desperate struggle to buy the others the time they so desperately needed. As the samurai ogre continues to hold the line against the colossal electric dragon, the rest of the party prepares to engage. The protagonist, Susaku, watches with a tense expression, acknowledging the ogre's role as a decoy. Beside him, the mage Otome announces with resolve that it is time for them to begin. She begins to explain her analysis of their foe, stating that the floor boss utilizes two distinct types of attacks. In the background, the dragon continues its relentless assault on the lone ogre. The first of these is a diffusion attack, which the dragon unleashes in a chaotic storm of electrical energy across the battlefield. The warrior, Choco, cries out that its power is far greater than before, noting that the wide, irregular nature of the assault makes it incredibly difficult to evade. In response, Otome declares that she will provide support. She explains that while Choco cannot break through the lightning on her own, a combination of her earth diffusion magic and grass dispersion magic will create the necessary opening. Her spell manifests instantly, causing a massive, gnarled wall of earth and roots to erupt from the ground, shielding Choco from the incoming electrical storm. The earthen dome holds firm against the dragon's onslaught, successfully blocking the arcs of lightning and forging a safe path forward. With the path secured, Otome continues her tactical breakdown. She posits that once the dragon realizes its diffusion attack is ineffective, it will be forced to switch tactics, and for defensive measures, her magic is better suited to the task. As if on cue, the beast shifts its strategy, gathering its immense power into a single point for a concentrated blast. Otome shouts a warning, yelling that her defenses cannot stop this attack, and that she is counting on Choco. The warrior braces for impact, questioning the recklessness of the plan. Otome quickly reassures her that because the attack is focused rather than dispersed, it will be easier to parry. Watching from a safe distance, Susaku explains the final piece of the strategy. The floor boss's attacks are determined by its aggression level. By demonstrating that the diffusion attack is useless, they can bait it into using the focused attack. He watches the electric dragon, realizing that if it continues to unleash such high-cost attacks, its mana will surely be depleted. The creature turns its head, fixing its gaze upon him. Just as he completes the thought, the dragon's assault ceases. The warrior, Choco, stands her ground as the electrical storm subsides, watching the now motionless beast. Seeing this pause, the mage Otome urgently calls out to him, warning that the dragon will self-destruct before it runs out of mana. He gasps in acknowledgement. The warrior, however, remains unconvinced. She questions if the beast is truly out of power, sensing that it still has reserves. The dragon's form begins to crackle with renewed energy. Her suspicion is confirmed as the dragon unleashes a new assault, forming three massive spheres of crackling electricity. She screams a warning for the others to fall back. The mage watches in horror, a terrible realization dawning on her. She had believed the dragon's attacks were limited to only two types, diffusion and convergence. But this was something new. The new attack manifests as a triple volley of concentrated energy spheres, each one a potent, focused blast. Faced with this unforeseen development, the mage cries out that she miscalculated and tells the warrior to change the plan. But the warrior stands firm, her gaze locked on the incoming threat. Susaku whirls on the mage, questioning her mistake. The warrior shouts over him, declaring that an attack of this scale is exactly what they need. It should be enough to finally drain the dragon's mana. He turns back to the warrior, demanding to know how she'll handle it. With fierce determination burning in her eyes, she roars, "I will cut it down." She declared her intention to use her acceleration ability, not just on her body, but to accelerate her arms and slash simultaneously. Susaku, watching from behind, questioned if such a feat was even possible. With a grimace, she admitted she had never attempted it before. As she tried to channel the power, her arms trembled under the weight of the greatsword. She realized with dawning horror that she lacked the strength to swing the massive blade even one more time. Just then, the mage called out to her, offering the use of dark magic. She explained that the spell would fix the sword to the warrior's hands, but warned that it would only hold for a short time. With unwavering trust, the mage declared that she was leaving it all to her. Bolstered by this support, the warrior steeled her resolve. She knew she had to succeed, but also understood that a simple, full-body acceleration was impossible. The fine motor control required for this maneuver was far too difficult. Facing the crackling sphere of energy, she resolved that there was no other choice. She envisioned the ideal motion, not one of brute force, but of beast-like flexibility and agility. The electric dragon loomed, its triple spheres of power crackling with immense energy. In response, her form seemed to shift, taking on the coiled, predatory stance of a wild animal. With a surge of power, she activated acceleration, her blade becoming a blur as it met the first sphere of lightning. She unleashed her new technique, the beast's triple strike. As the electrical energy violently dissipated around her, she stood panting, her attack successful. Turning her head, she looked towards Susaku and the mage, telling him that she was now counting on him, for she had bet everything on this single chance. Her companions could only stare, momentarily stunned by her feat.